Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Linode. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is the editor-in-chief of MacStories.net, Mr. Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We should talk about our topic today, but I wanted to get a quick update from you about your must-have apps, because I know...
Okay.
I know you've been working on this because I haven't talked to you much this week. You've been busy writing all week. And where do things stand? Do you have any update for listeners?
So, yes, I do. I mentioned a few weeks ago that my usual annual story about my must-have apps, which I publish usually just before Christmas, was going to be a little late this time because I had a bunch of new entries to consider, some final thoughts to put together, and really the home screen itself was in a bit of a state of flux due to something else that I've also been working on, which is related to the Mac Stories shortcut icons, which Sylvia and I, we've been working on. And I don't want to spoil the surprise, but it's something related but different and new and should come up very, very soon. So that also sort of required me to revise my home screen some more. And but I'm happy to say that all that is done. We're getting ready to release all of these things publicly. And I believe that you should be able to see both that Mac Stories shortcut icon surprise and my must-have apps story very, very soon on the site. So that's coming along really well. The format, I mean, it's consistent with previous years, but there's some differences in terms of like the sections of the story and a few extras that I also mentioned throughout the story. So it's still gonna be titled the 2019 edition, even though it's kind of late January, because it is a record of the state of my apps up until December. It just took me a couple of weeks to finish it in January, but it still refers to 2019. So there will be a 2020 edition at the end of the year, but this one comes out in January, but it still refers to 2019, and I'm very happy with it. It comes with 50 apps. I think it's about the same as in previous years, and it's just one story that includes both iPhone and iPad apps, but no Mac apps. So just iPhone and iPad, plus some extra mentions of other things. So very, very soon. I don't want to give you a date because I learned my lesson not to promise exact dates.
Yes,
but it's very close.
All right. Well, you're being a little bit mysterious, and
actually, just mysterious with the date.
Okay, all right. You said something about extras, and you've got to have a little bit of a surprise in there, I suppose.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to it because I have a pretty good sense of what most of the apps are that you use every year, except you always tend to throw a little bit of a curveball or a surprise in there that even I am not expecting, and so I always enjoy reading it and trying out a few new things.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Federico, let's move on to our topic today, and that is music utilities, because, I think I enjoy Apple Music. I think the music app is pretty good, but it is a little lacking in a few areas, and I think discovery is one of those. And so, for today's topic, I wanted to kind of explore music discovery apps, but even go beyond that maybe a little bit and talk a little bit about how we go about discovering some of the new music that we listen to help listeners out with that. But first, let's talk a little bit, I guess, about Apple Music, because when it comes to new releases, things that you don't know to look for because you don't know they exist, I think that Apple Music has a little trouble surfacing those. The first thing that bugs me is that the new releases they're in there, and they're in the For You section. And they're also, I guess, in the Browse tab too, but they're all the way down at the bottom. And, in the For You section, I believe that they are based, at least in part, on things you've previously listened to or browsed or something within music. But the fact that they're down at the very bottom and hard to get to, I find a little bit difficult to remember to go down there and just check out what's in the new releases. And very often there's just not things in there that I end up finding out about other ways that I want to listen to.
Yeah, that the fact that they are somewhat buried at the bottom of the list is very annoying. And something that also always annoyed me, even back in the days of the iTunes Store, and it's really the fact that there's no good way, there's no reliable way, I should say, that Apple Music shows you the exact release date of an album. And what is really weird to me is that the iTunes Store usually does have exact dates for an upcoming album. So it tells you like the new record from the 1975s is coming out in February. It's not anymore, but it's an example.
Right.
But Apple Music, unless there's like a specific exception, it just says upcoming album. It doesn't tell you when it's actually coming out. And so combining the problem of finding the new releases at the very bottom of the For You page with not having a reliable way to know when new music is coming out, I find the whole experience of discovering and keeping track of new releases to be very limiting in Apple Music. And it's so strange to have this sort of contrast between the iTunes Store displaying you an actual release date, and Apple Music not doing the same. But sometimes it does. It's like it's this inconsistency that drives me crazy. Like, why do you only do that sometimes, but the iTunes Store does it all the time? I don't get it.
No, I don't either. I've certainly never figured out the pattern to it, because you're right. It's there sometimes, but oftentimes it's not. And the other thing, I guess, is that you can get notifications of new albums by adding them to your library before they're released. And then on the release date, you'll get a push notification. The problem with that is, first of all,
good luck with those.
Right. First of all, I don't think that they come very reliably. I mean, I think maybe about half the time I get those push notifications, or maybe I just missed them somehow. And then second is that I don't necessarily want to add an album that I haven't heard to my library in order to get a notification. If I know it's a band I really, really like, yeah, I'll do that. But for the most part, I just want to know when it's released so I can listen to it. And if I like it, then I'll add it to my library. That's definitely an interaction issue.
So I was thinking about this just today. The whole pre-save or pre-add culture that's basically become the norm in the music industry. I find that really odd. And I think it's more of a byproduct of the design decisions of Spotify and Apple Music rather than an actual thing that artists like to do. So hear me out. I think, so on Instagram, for example, you follow an artist, and all the time when they announce a new single or a new album coming out, you see all the time these messages that tell you pre-add or pre-save in your library to be notified when the album is out. And I don't think, just like you mentioned, that people really like the idea of pre-saving something that they don't necessarily know if they're going to like or not. I think it's more of a way that the artists have figured out a system to sort of circumvent the limitations of Spotify and Apple Music, so that at least you will have some way to know when the new album is out. All of this would be actually fixed if only the new releases pages of both Spotify and Apple Music had a more prominent position in those respective apps, and also if the notification system actually worked. Or, and this is a crazy idea, I know, what if you had a simple way to see when an album is coming out in the music app and actually save that somewhere, like to your calendar or to some other page in your Apple Music dashboard? Like this whole thing of pre-saving your library to be notified, that's not a thing that people like to do. That is a system that we've come up with. It's a workaround, but it's not really an elegant solution to the problem.
Yeah, the notification system should be decoupled from the download or library adding functionality, because you're right. I'd love to have a little notify button, and I just tap on that, and then I have an option to either just get a push notification, or maybe I want to put it on a calendar, whatever it is. I mean, Well, we're going to talk about Music Harbor in a little bit. I love what it has for notifications.
Mhm.
But what are some other ways that you go about discovering new music? I mean, one of the ones that I use a lot is just listening to some of the
Mm.
frequently updated playlists on Apple Music, and I have over time kind of found some favorites, mostly in like the alternative category that I listen to a lot. That's one way I do it, and I just try to, as I'm listening, have music available so that if I like something, I can give it the little heart or add it to my library or add it to a playlist of my own, whatever I want to do.
I usually use playlists as well. The ones on the front page, are basically the ones that they show you the popular songs, like New Music Daily is one of them. And I use them, not a lot, but I do use them. I am going to say something that is maybe a bit unconventional. I do listen to Beats One. I think it's like when I have the time, especially Friday, 6 p.m., my local time. That's when Zane Lowe does the New Music Daily weekly show, which is a little confusing. It's called New Music Daily, but it's
I
weekly.
know.
The idea would be that Friday it's New Music Day, but this one is a weekly show, and that is usually a really good way to get to know more about the hot new release of the week. They usually have like interviews with artists. It's really well done. So I Beats One is a good way to discover new music, but it's also like it's one of those products. It's been 5 years and it's missing so many core functionalities that it really
Right.
makes me wonder, does anybody at Apple even pay attention to this anymore? Or have they just left these guys in this building doing the Beats One radio and kind of forgotten about them? Because really, like, it's incredible that it's been 5 years. So Beats One launched with Apple Music in 2015, and it's been 5 years. And there's still, 5 years later, like the most common feature that you would expect from a radio, being able to see a schedule. There's still
Right.
no schedule feature for Beats One. It's not in music, it's not on the web. Like, show me an actual schedule and notify me when a program I'm interested in goes live.
Exactly.
These are the basics.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I wrote the article on Mac Stories about Zane Lowe's new show, New Music Daily, and I've never really listened to it except for around the time that it first came out for that very reason. I mean, if I'm sitting at my Mac or working in front of my iPad, it'd be great if I got a push notification that I could just, one of the rich push notifications, I could tap it, go straight to the show and start listening when it went live. Because I just don't think to do it ever. I mean, a lot of times that's when I'm doing something like assembling our weekly newsletter for the club, and having music on in the background is what I do while I do that. And I'd love to have that show available, but I'm going to have to make a note to myself and try it next time I'm putting something together on a Friday.
So you mentioned Music Harbor,
Yes.
which I think we both use a lot. So this is a utility that scans your music library because it's one of the ways that the app can know about the artists that you already follow by virtue of having saved them in your library with songs and albums. So after having scanned your music library, it prepares this list of artists. And basically, the idea of the app is that you go to the releases page and it shows you the latest releases from the artists that you have in your library. And you can tap on a music release, whether it's a single, an album, an EP, or a remix, and you can start listening from within Music Harbor, or you can show that item in the Apple Music app. There's also another feature which I use all the time, the upcoming releases page. So this is where it shows you future releases from artists that you follow. And what you can do is also you can show the item in the music app. If any singles are already available from that upcoming album, you can listen to them. But really what you can do is you can see a date for an upcoming album and you can add that as an event to your system calendar, which is one of my favorite features because I save the upcoming albums I'm interested in a calendar that I have called Music Releases. And then I use the Countdowns app on my iPhone to import those as countdown items. So I can see that, for example, the new Halsey album is like a week away or that kind of stuff. I love Music Harbor. I think it's the missing new releases feature of Apple Music. Like this idea of here's a chronological feed of literally every single new release for the artists that you follow. And here's an upcoming feed of albums that will come out in the future with exact dates. And if you want, you can add them to your calendar. I love this app. I use it all the time. It brings me a lot of joy because it feels like exactly the kind of app that was made for somebody like me.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. In fact, this app is probably the most recent app that made it to my home screen on my iPhone because I enjoy it so much. And I have a couple of tips, I guess. One is if you have a really extensive music library, you might want to, instead of automatically importing every single artist, go through and pick them by hand. It can take a little bit of time, but that's what I ended up doing because I just have too many years of music where there's things in my music library that I just don't really want to listen to anymore, and I haven't taken the time to take them out. So instead of automatically sucking everything in, I went through and did it by hand. And another feature that's brand new that I really like that comes in handy when you're already listening to Apple Music is that there's an extension. And the action extension allows you, when you're listening to something, to add that one-off artist to the ones you follow in Music Harbor. So if I'm listening to one of those playlists that I enjoy and I hear something that isn't familiar, I can just add the artist right there and find out about their releases right from there. The other thing I've started to do is there's a tab for videos, and it works just like the music, and it has, all new music videos by the artists that you follow. And I just started a new playlist called Music Videos, things I want to watch at some point down the road, and drop them in there because you can add things to a playlist directly from inside Music Harbor. I don't know about you, Federico, but I don't really use the concerts or the news tab very much. The news, it seems to me that this new tab, first of all, with the news tab, you have to actually tap on individual artists, and they scroll along at the top of the view horizontally. And if you have a lot of artists that you follow, that's not probably the most efficient way to navigate the artists. Plus, I found that the news there really only tends to be news available for the very biggest artists. So like if you go to Taylor Swift, you'll find some news, but unless there's some very recent news on anybody else, it seems like it's usually kind of empty. And the concerts is I guess, run by Songkick, which is another app that I've used in the past more than I do now. But you can't really drill down and to a level of detail that works for me on this. I haven't used it a whole lot, but overall, I think the app is fantastic. I love, as you said, the release section as well as the upcoming, adding things to a calendar. It all works super well, and it's integrated pretty tightly with Apple Music. So that's probably my number one used music app at the moment.
Yeah, it's really well done. I love it. I even considered put it in on my main home screen because I really use it all the time. Right now, it's on my second page. So we'll see what happens in 2020. So,
right.
John, have you played with this app called Miximum, which I believe Ryan reviewed on Mac Stories?
Yeah, he did. And it's basically smart playlist functionality for Apple Music, which is not built into the music app. You can, at least not on iOS. You can still make smart playlists on the Mac, but not iOS. And so, it's really simple. You just build with a series of tokens, various search parameters to find music that you want. I mean, the other weekend I put together a smart playlist, which was just songs that I had loved in the last 2 years because I wanted something that was current, but not super current. And then I put that on shuffle, and it saves that playlist back to Apple Music where you can listen to them. So yeah, I don't use it a lot because I don't make a lot of smart playlists. I try to keep and this is a whole nother discussion, especially with the way music works on the Mac, is that when you add a playlist, the list gets so long. My list of playlists is incredibly long because there's a whole bunch of the Apple created ones there, but also my own. And I try to keep these smart playlists in a folder so that they're easy to access in one place. And I don't make them too often, but when I do, this is the app that I use when I'm on iOS. It's pretty nice.
Mm. I play with it briefly. I don't love the idea of having to recreate a playlist, basically to having to regenerate it from scratch
Yes.
every time you want to load fresh data into it, because basically the limitation here is that Miximum cannot keep a constantly updating smart playlist. It's not like it works in the music app and, same back in the days of iTunes on the Mac, that you create a smart playlist and it keeps updating itself over time. That's a feature that Apple should build, by the way,
Yes.
to be able. And I know that's, there's folks who say, oh, who cares about smart playlists anymore? Well, I think, I get it that like a lot of people just care about what's hot and new and popular. But I mean, why not? Why not cater to all kinds of users, both those who just casually browse and just listen to what's new and what's in the charts, and those who really want to spend a bunch of time inside of the music app to discover and rearrange and fiddle and tweak things and create smart playlists and, find exactly the music they're looking for. I mean, it wouldn't hurt, especially when you have a subscription service and you want to make sure that people keep paying over time. Why not make everybody happy? I guess would be my argument. Why not?
Right.
I know that it's not super popular, but why not? And
Yeah.
really, you could apply this idea to a bunch of different services.
Well, I do find smart playlists to be helpful. I mean, especially I'll do things like I'll create one that is just the music that I've loved, and that I've got probably 8 days worth of music in there now. And it's just a great way when I don't know what I want to listen to, but I know I want to listen to something I like. I just put that on shuffle, and it's a big enough list now that it doesn't get boring. Or I'll create another list that is things that I've loved that I haven't listened to in 12 months or something like that. So I kind of can rediscover old music. It's a nice way to do it. You're right about Miximum that it cannot automatically update. In some respects, that's a feature. If you find an Apple playlist that gets updated frequently, for instance, you can snapshot one of their playlists essentially and freeze it in time and rename it and do whatever you want with it and have it that way. You can also play playlists in reverse order, which I know this is something that we'll talk a little bit about MusicBot that you added to MusicBot. I think Ryan had suggested that because, if you have I have it every year I make a mix for myself that's like songs that I like from that particular year. And my 2019 mix, when I would go to listen to it, I'd hear those first 10 or 20 songs over and over and over because maybe I get interrupted and I start doing something else and I never get to the end of the playlist. With reverse order, you can start at the bottom, which are presumably the ones you've listened to the least and are the most current, and you can listen to them from the bottom up, which is a really great feature of MusicBot that I use a lot now too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Ryan made the request of being able to listen in reverse order, and I think it's it's one of those features that I hadn't thought about, but now that it totally makes sense to be able to start a playlist from the latest entries, not from the oldest ones. So
right.
I'm glad that Miximum gave Ryan the idea for having such feature in MusicBot. Another utility that works with your existing music app is albums. Now, this is I think it feels to me like it's a relatively newcomer in the space. And albums makes it easy for you to listen to music by start listening to the whole album. So it's sort of designed with an old school mindset of rather than listening via playlists or via individual songs, you start the whole album from the first song and you listen to the whole thing up until the last song in the album. And yes, I love the idea. Like it's one of those different ways to listen to music in the streaming era. I do appreciate it's maybe like a nostalgic thing. I don't know, but I do appreciate that somebody's making this kind of app that lets you start from the first one and listen to the whole record. And even the now playing view of the app is really well done in that you can skip by song, but also there's a progress bar that lets you choose, if you don't want to listen like in continuous mode from the first song to the last one, there's like a scrubber thing that lets you move from song to song instead of having to tap the arrow multiple times to skip. And it's really well done. I like the UI. It uses this grid view to show you albums from your library. I do wish there was a way, and maybe I haven't figured this one out myself, but I do wish there was a way to say, show me just albums that I consider my favorites, which is something I like because it's one of the main functionalities of MusicBot. So this idea of, these are my favorite albums. These are the stuff that I go back to time and time again, that I really want to listen to from start to finish multiple times a week. And that's why I made it a feature of MusicBot. And I do wish that albums allowed me to create my own collection of favorites, of like frequent albums that I listen to on a regular basis.
Yeah, that would be a really nice addition. What I think is kind of cool about this app too is that, if you really are an album purist and you want to listen just to full albums, there's a setting that you can turn on so it only shows the full albums that you have in your collection. So if you just have one-off singles here and there, it won't display those. And that UI, which is a grid of album covers, you can pull to refresh it, and it will then generate a new order of albums. I mean, it shuffles the albums, and you can listen to them shuffled if you'd like, one album at a time, or you can scroll through until you find something that you like and play that. If you have a very long collection of albums, that's scrolling through a shuffled list of them to find one you want it's a good way to discover things that you may not have thought to listen to, but it's not a good way to actually find the album that way. And I do think if you had a favorites, you could probably restrict it to a group that made it a little easier to jump around from one to the other.
Yeah. I saw, though, that there's also an in-app purchase that lets you scrabble. Is that how you say scrabble?
I think so.
Yep. The things you listen to last.fm. This is one of those features that a bunch of people often ask me on Twitter or via the club's newsletters. Like, is it possible to create a shortcut that lets you scrabble your listening activity to Last.fm? And even though it's based on a misconception, shortcuts cannot run things in the background automatically all the time. It also feels a bit anachronistic to me. Like, is Last.fm a thing that people still care about? And apparently, yes, at least some people do. The service is still around. The website is full of ads. I do wonder, like, how is Last.fm still an independent company? Like, how has it not been acquired by anybody at this point? It's a really surprising story to me that Last.fm still there.
Yeah, it's always felt to me like it's barely hanging on because there have been so many apps that have come and gone that have the functionality built into it. And I know that in the past, sometimes it's, their API has been a little difficult to deal with and hasn't worked super well. But yeah, it continues to be quite popular. The last thing I should mention about albums, though, is that there are categories, too, that you can browse through. You don't have to go through, the shuffled album cover view. You can go to your library, pick a category, which are things like genres, artists, decades, things like that. And then you can look at the albums that way. And certain of the categories have search functionality. Plus, there's a search button on the main UI too. So you can find particular albums that way as well.
It looks like I have 6 unread messages in my Last.fm inbox.
Okay.
The last one is from 2 years ago from somebody I don't know.
Okay. Well, I have an account too, and I probably haven't logged into it in 3 or 4 years, so maybe I have some too. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Linode. Whether you're working on a personal project or managing your enterprise's infrastructure, Linode has the pricing, support, and scale you need to take your project to the next level. And they have 11 data centers worldwide, including the newest center in Sydney, Australia. And with their enterprise-grade hardware, S3-compatible storage options, and their next-generation network, Linode delivers performance you expect at a surprisingly good price. Get started on Linode today with a $20 credit for listeners of this show. Dedicated CPU plans with physical cores reserved just for you, GPU compute plans suitable for AI, machine learning, and video processing, block storage and object storage that can scale to your storage requirements, one-click installs of the most popular apps including WordPress, LampStack, and game servers for Minecraft, and a whole lot more. Just go to linode.com/appstories and use the promo code AppStories2020 when creating a new Linode account to get $20 towards your next project. Oh, and Linode are hiring right now too. So if that's something that interests you, go on over to linode.com/careers to find out more. Again, the URL for that $20 credit is linode.com/appstories, and the promo code AppStories2020. Our thanks to Linode for their support of the show.
Okay, what else do we want to talk about here? There's Doppler. So Doppler I have played with, and it's part of those category of apps that seem to be designed primarily for you folks who like to keep a local music library. So people who like to own their music, which I understand because I do have a music library that I own. It's a FLAC library. So I keep that in Plex. I keep that in an external SSD, and I also listen to that via my Sony Walkman. But there's still folks who like to sync their music from their PCs, from their Macs, to their iPhones and iPads via a cable, via the music app, and to just listen to music that they own via the built-in music app without the Apple Music subscription. And Doppler is one of those apps that lets you manage and listen to your local music library. From what I remember, it's very nice looking. It lets you create playlists and it lets you listen to your local library. I don't really use this because I stopped syncing my music 10 years ago, maybe. But I know that a lot of folks still do this, especially for people who like to listen to classical music and they have an entire collection of classical albums. I understand why there's still a market for this kind of product. I just don't use them myself.
Yeah, I don't either because, like you, I really have gone all in on streaming. However, it is a great looking app, and it does solve the problem of having a local music library and importing music because there's import functionality built into it. So if you get your music from other sources, like maybe it's SoundCloud or Bandcamp or something like that, or maybe you have, maybe you get podcasts that are sometimes on Patreon, there'll be extra subscriber episodes of podcasts and things like that. All of those are good sources for audio content that you can pull into this app. So it's a great choice for that. Plus, you can edit the metadata, create playlists right from inside the app. It's very much an old school one that way, and probably one of the nicest design choices of third-party players.
We should also mention third-party Apple Music clients, which is also a thing that exists on the platform. And
yes.
Specifically, I want to call out two of them. The first one is called Soor. That's SOOR. And it came out last year, in February of last year. It was one of the first examples of a third-party app that embeds certain Apple Music sections. It comes with its own For You page. It connects directly to your account, so it can load recommendations that are based on your Apple Music account. I don't really use it, but I understand why certain people who pay for Apple Music may like to use a different UI. It comes with its own drag and drop gestures, for example. It's an interesting idea, I believe. And also, another really popular one, I believe the developers are working on a major update. It's called Marvis. Marvis is another Apple Music client that is really well done, especially on the iPhone. It comes with this one-handed interaction that allows you to hold down the screen and swipe to the right to show this sort of floating sidebar that lets you, while still holding on the screen down on the screen with your thumb, it lets you scrub through different sections like home, playlists, and albums, for example. And
Right.
just like Soar, it comes with its own For You page. It's sort of like customizable. You can choose which sections you want to see. You can show charts, for example. You can show most played. You can show recently added. And it's really polished. I should say it's a really polished app, and a lot of tap and hold gestures, which we sure do love here at App Stories. Hidden long press gestures. There's plenty
Yes.
of them in Marvis. And if you're an Apple Music subscriber, I guess you should check it out because it's again clean design, some different ideas from the music app, and it's a fascinating idea, if anything.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting to me in all of these apps across the category of music is that they tend to fall into a couple of camps. There's ones that are very manual and customizable, people who really want to be hands-on with the way their music is arranged and the way they listen to it. And there are other ones which is more the Apple route, which are more automatic. It's either kind of spoon-fed to you in a way, or you rely on search to find things, and there are fewer ways to kind of sort, filter, and customize the way things look. I think I kind of fall somewhere in the middle, probably closer to just relying on search than anything else. So I'm fine with Apple's music app, but I do like to have a little bit of customization here and there, and I do wish Apple Music allowed that, because I would promote the new releases up higher on the For You page, and I would have like the alternative genre right on the front page of Browse instead of burying it behind a bunch of taps and scrolling. But that unfortunately that's not possible. Federico, I'd like to close out with MusicBot a little bit. We've talked about it before, and I think what you've accomplished with that is a lot. In some respects, it's like there are elements of a lot of these apps we've talked about in MusicBot, and that's largely because it's based on the MusicKit API that Apple provides and uses shortcuts to access that, especially the Pro version, which uses Toolbox Pro to access a lot of that MusicKit stuff.
Yeah, that's right. So MusicBot is available for free on Mac Stories, and I describe it as sort of the Apple Music Assistant powered by shortcuts. So it comes with features that, for example, allow you to save a collection of your favorite albums and start listening to them again. It comes with different playback modes, so you can pick and choose the songs that you want to listen to, or you can play a whole album or playlist from the first song, or you can play in reverse. It comes with smart mixes. So the idea would be that you can generate this dynamic, always different mixes that use different criteria to put together these dynamic playlists for you. So, for example, you can have a Genius mix that will give you songs that in theory you should like. You can create a top of the ear mix. You can see your recently played songs, your recently played albums. You can shuffle songs by decade. So if you want to have an 80s mix for an 80s themed party, you can do that with MusicBot. It comes with so many different features. So if you're listening to something, for example, and you want to see more from the current artist that you're listening to, you can also do that. And in MusicBot Pro, all of this is taken to the extreme, basically, because it integrates in the Pro version. It integrates directly with your Apple Music account. So you can love songs, you can add stuff to your library, and you can search the entire Apple Music catalog. So the Pro version comes with even more, lets you do even more. But even for free, I think there's plenty of functionality for any kind of music lover in MusicBot. And especially if you're the kind of person who uses Apple Music and also owns a bunch of AirPlay 2 speakers like HomePods or Sonos or some other AirPlay device, MusicBot will work with them as well. So you can connect to a HomePod or to another AirPlay 2 speaker. You can control playback, you can control the volume, and it's all done very nicely in this list of commands. I have it on my home screen. It's very nice. I use it myself all the time. And I've been working on updates both for the free version, but especially for the Pro one for club members. that will come with, in theory, even faster menus and even more Apple Music integrations.
Oh, nice. There are so many things in here that I use a lot. I mean, we talked a little bit about Music Harbor and the way you can add things to a calendar from there, and you've got a function in here which is new releases and or upcoming releases, and it just creates a list of everything in that calendar, so you can see exactly when the albums that you're tracking are coming out. And I also like using current artist or song a lot too, because it gives you some information about what you're listening to and lets you access other songs by that artist. So those are a couple of my favorite features. Anything else we should cover today, you think?
We should mention websites that we read for music stuff, I guess.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these between the two of us are similar. I mean, I use RSS to follow these, and my RSS client has an awful lot of stuff in it. A lot of it is related to the stuff that we do at Mac Stories, but I keep a separate tag for music, and if I get really busy, I just kind of mark them all as read and don't read them. But when I have a little time, I like to sit down and read a bunch of these, which are, Chorus FM. I know that's one that I discovered because of you. I mean, you kind of tuned me into that one, and that's a great website. They do really great coverage of music there.
Jason Tate and his team, they do a fantastic job. You may know Jason if you grew up in the late 90s. You may remember AbsolutePunk.net. And Chorus FM is the new version of that. It's
I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah, Absolute Punk was an institution back in the punk rock and emo rock days. I read the Absolute Punk website and forums religiously back in middle school and high school. And in a funny sort of weird life coincidence, I came across Chorus FM, and then I realized that Jason was also a Mac Stories reader. And now it's this weird scenario where one of the people that I was one of my sort of role models for writing stuff on the internet back in the day is now a Mac Stories reader and links to Mac Stories on Chorus FM when I publish stuff about music usually. He's a great guy, and the website is really well done. It's very much in tune with my music tastes these days.
Yeah.
It's they cover all kinds of genres, not just they have an eye for punk rock and alternative rock, of course, but they talk about pop, they talk about R&B, they talk about all kinds of stuff, and they have this newsletter that you can get for free every Friday, but you can also become a member, and you basically pay to support the team and be able to read the exclusive content on the website, and to also remove ads. So it's a very nicely done. The forums are still there if you want to discuss with other people. They have weekly playlists that they put together and that you can get on Spotify and Apple Music. So it's if you love music, you gotta love Chorus FM. So that would be my pitch. Speaking of the word pitchfork, of course, right. It's another institution when it comes to long form music reviews. It's very likely that, there's also the meme of like the extra fancy pitchfork review. They treat music like an art, obviously, like an art form. They, their reviews are, and I can relate to this. They are detailed reviews. They are, sometimes extravagant reviews, I guess, but I guess Pitchfork, they have a soul. And that's, I guess, the best compliment that you can pay to any publication. They have an identity, they have a character, and more often than not, even though sometimes I read the Pitchfork review and I'm like, nah, I disagree with this, sometimes over time, I start thinking, maybe they were right about this album after all. So they do an excellent job, obviously.
Yeah. They are very opinionated, but
yes.
Definitely have a strong voice, and I enjoy reading the reviews or when I have a chance. And they have a music festival in Chicago every summer,
and Paris.
Yeah, in
too.
Paris too. The one in Chicago. I've only been once, but it was fantastic. It's on the west side in a pretty big park, but not a huge park. Very manageable music festival compared to something like Lollapalooza or whatever it happens to be. And they tend to have really great up and coming artists at it. So I think that's something I may try to hit again this summer.
I also want to recommend, obviously, there's the Alternative Press website and Twitter account, which I also follow. Stereo Gum, another website that's been around for a really long time. And and honestly, I should have done this sooner. I subscribe to this newsletter. It's called Inside Music. And I know that you probably have too many newsletters in your inbox already, but Inside Music is really, really well done. So it talks about the music industry, so it's not just about here's the latest stuff that you can listen to.
Right.
It's about the news about the music industry and the sort of different charts about, like, for example, what streaming is doing to music, for example. It's very interesting, and it combines these business aspects with tech talk, of course. So they talk about streaming, they talk about the latest devices and headphones. It's a bit of everything about the music industry. It's curated by Tyler, and I'm going to say this wrong. I'm sorry, Tyler Hayes, maybe I want to say.
Okay.
It's Tyler H on Twitter. Great, really. It's a really great newsletter. It's short, it's compact. I love it. It's a bit of a sort of imagine the interesting link section of our newsletter, Mac Stories Weekly, but just about music. So it's very nice.
That's a good recommendation. I'm not familiar with this. I'm going to have to sign up. I mean, I'll leave everybody as we close out the show this week with a top tip, which is something that I know you've been doing a lot recently too. If you have, and particularly Feedbin is good at this for their RSS service, you can get a unique email address from that will send newsletters directly into your RSS client. And I like doing that because I get a lot of email, and I was finding that the handful of newsletters that I have were getting lost amongst a lot of other just junk. And so I would sometimes just forget to read them when I really did want to see them. So I've started sending them all to RSS, and they've got, again, with Feedbin, their own tags. So they show up in a separate folder in my RSS reader, and I just read them like I read any other content that I collect on the web. So that's my tip for the day.
Very nice.
All right, Federico, I think we'll finish up right there. I want to thank our sponsor again. That's Linode. And, of course, you can find me and Federico over at macstories.net and at Club Mac Stories. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.